Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to another speed build for the Disney Save. Today we are working on a speed build that is going to be a replacement lot for the previous video that you guys saw. The last one was a wedding venue based on the Little Mermaid, specifically the Kiss the Girl scene of Eric and Ariel in the boat and that entire musical number. So my patrons actually came up with that idea and I loved it, and I knew the very first second that I heard it had to be in the save file. It's very clever and it just fits well with some of the other things that we've done in accordance with wedding venues so far in the save file. So that was really the primary idea for this lot, and that's the one that's going to come by default with the Disney save. However, another idea was suggested to do a Little Mermaid themed museum, specifically because one, Ariel is really shown to be a collector and she has an entire space in the movie that is featured showing her entire collection, and it's kind of like her secret hideout. It's something that's very, very important to her character, and we don't always get to do museums. If I'm completely honest, I don't really love making them. They're not one of my favorite lots to do. I think that they can sometimes be on the more boring side, but this idea to use Ariel's grotto and her little space where she houses her humans collection as a museum was such a great one, and I knew again that I had to have that idea in the save file as well. We don't have a ton of space in Sulani, and so the idea to make it a replacement lot came to me, and we're using it for the same space as the Kiss the Girl Lagoon wedding venue. So you'll have the option between either, but by default, the previous video, the one of the wedding venue, will come with the save file, and this one, which we are calling Thingamabob Grotto, is going to be on the gallery as a replacement lot. That's really the only way for you to get your hands on any type of replacement or bonus lots. And I've also recently started to introduce the idea of bonus characters. So those will also be bonus Sims that are not going to roam around the world as free roaming townies, and they won't be included in a household for various reasons. So I highly recommend, you don't have to follow me on the gallery. I'm not like I don't pay attention to any of that unless you want to. But if you are looking for extra stuff and content for the save file, that's really where you're going to find most of it when it comes to these replacement lots and bonus Sims. I've done a few other replacement lots in the past. Two that come to mind are both residential up until this point. I actually created the first Toy Story house as the one that is the base that comes in Evergreen Harbor. If you haven't seen that world, it's very Pixar themed. Lots of Toy Story there. So by default, the save file comes with the home that's shown in the first film, because that's kind of in line with the ages of the characters that are there as I've created them for the save file. But the rest of the films for Toy Story take place in a different home. That's kind of one of the things about the film, is that they're moving. So you get to see another version of the house in other films. And so I felt like a lot of people were either going to really be interested in like one or the other, like it's the house that you think of when you think of Toy Story. So I made both, and that way you have the option for either, or as Molly sort of gets older and maybe needs a bigger room. In the beginning, I think Andy and Molly share a bedroom. So as she needs her own space, that house really wasn't going to fit for that, and so you would need more room and a bigger house. And so that's available on the gallery as, I think it's called the Toy Story 2 house, but it's featured in some of the other films as well. And then one of the other ones that I built was the Northuldra. They are a group of characters that are shown in the second Frozen film, and because we were doing a lot of Frozen and Mount Komorebi, and I didn't really have the space to include a lot of those characters, I created their residential as a replacement for the Arendelle rental village. So up until this point, it has been basically all replacement lots have been residentials. This is the first one where I'm giving an option for a second commercial type lot. And this is not going to be the only one for Sulani. There is another one coming up. I don't know if it'll be the next video you guys see, but it should be relatively soon. We are doing 2 replacement lots in Sulani. So instead of 2 lots, normally it'll be 4 total, and there's lots of options to pick from. In that case, you can kind of mix and match as you please. Now, as far as the inspiration for Thingamabob Grotto here, obviously for the exterior of the building, I don't have anything that I can use for reference. If we're basing this off of Ariel's cave where she keeps her collection, that outside of the cave is not really shown, and if it is, it's just going to be like rocks and corals kind of making some sort of grander structure. But that doesn't really translate well when creating creating something in the save file, obviously I have to have some kind of a building or structure. And if you'll recall, if you're a longtime watcher of the save file, it's not uncommon for me to make a lot specifically from a Disney princess or based on a Disney princess that is kind of their contribution to a given world. So for example, in Henford on Bagley, we had Snow White's contribution to that world, which was called Happily Ever After, and it is a historic garden and park with little features that give tribute to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And one of my very first ideas for the save file way back when I did Willow Creek was to have Belle have her own library that she had kind of designed and contributed to the world as a royal. So this is along the same lines of that, being that this is a museum that Ariel has kind of put into the world as her contribution, and it's where she now houses her human collection and her collection so other people can enjoy it as well. So the interior was really easy. I can just go in and use basically what we see in the film from her part of that world scene, and that kind of does like a whole 360 of the inside of her cave and shows off the types of ideas, like the types of things you could imagine that she might collect or be able to find in the water. Additionally, we get more kind of reference that I was able to use because some of this is featured in some Disneyland parks in various forms. So it had been done and sort of represented in a physical form that was really easy to replicate. And honestly, once we do the interior, it's really just going to be stacking rocks and coral and making it look like it's underwater, and then using those coral and rocks as shelves to place various collectible items. But the exterior, I had almost no idea where to start for the basis of this. Typically, when this happens, I will scroll through Pinterest or Tumblr or just randomly on Google until I can find a couple of images for things that I'm happy with as like a general shell reference. I don't really like to just start from absolutely nowhere because I feel like I need at least a basic shape of what I want to do in my head. Otherwise, it takes me so long to figure out the shape and it doesn't make for a very good video, and I'm usually not very happy with it. So I'd rather spend more time dedicated to trying to find some type of artwork or something, some like video game asset, a painting, anything that can be inspirational as far as the exterior goes. And so I had found a couple that were like mermaid homes, underwater homes, various fantasy buildings that I was happy with, and I just decided to kind of use that as like the basis of the shape for it. I also knew I wanted to keep it kind of smaller. It's supposed to be a collection, and I just didn't want it to be like this massive museum filled with all sorts of stuff. It's really not necessary. So maybe focusing a little bit more on the landscaping and the plants and doing some pretty little ponds and things that are very in line with mermaids in general, something that feels like Ariel. And then additionally, there is going to be kind of like a theme going forward that you'll notice with the next few builds in particular, where I just kind of imagined that if King Triton's castle is like the focal point of Atlantica, then obviously Atlantica itself is more, it's bigger, there's buildings, there's marketplaces, there's life, other people's homes, things like that. It's like a whole village, it's a whole town. So these are the pieces that you don't get to see right next to the castle, and so they look a lot like King Triton's castle, but they have some differences to differentiate them on their own. So there is definitely some references as far as the exterior goes for this in regards to making it look kind of similar to King Triton's castle with similar shapes and similar colors and things like that, but different enough that it definitely stands out on its own. At the beginning, I did try to go with the round rooms and really make it match because I did exclusively, I think, use round rooms when it came to making Triton's castle, and I do think of round rooms when generally creating like mermaid spaces. I just think it really goes hand in hand. However, I just find them really difficult to use, and I wasn't able to connect them in the way that I was happy with when trying to create the shell of it. So I just scrapped it and was like, you know what, we don't need it for this one. It's not like necessary since I'm not using a direct reference from one of the films where people are really going to notice the difference. I also realized that the round walls were going to make it very difficult to place organic pieces in here, and I knew I wanted to use some of these Sulani debug rock structures, coral, things like that. And they all just have weird wonky shapes, even like the corals that are meant to be kind of placed into the walls or are supposed to be kind of put up against other rocks. They were not going to fit and function very well in a super round space. It would clip through the walls and just go everywhere and be kind of messy looking. And obviously I didn't want that, so I think this works out a lot better and it makes it look a lot cleaner and you don't really miss the round walls at all. In the film, she has this stone that she lays down across when she's singing, and it's kind of like this little resting stone that she has right in the middle of her collection where she can look all the way up. And it's featured a few times in that scene, so I wanted to make sure that it was here to pay reference to that. I also decided to just kind of get rid of some of the foundations and make it as tall as possible and then remove the floors so that you really get this effect of looking up and out, especially with the glass roofs and things like that, and you can sort of like see outside of it. So it really is meant on the inside to embody that entire scene. And honestly, I'm super happy with it. I think it really does. I used a lot of those debug coral items, sized them up and down, and kind of hid them into the rocks here and there. A lot of placing all of those Sulani rocks around on the walls is cut from the video because it's extremely repetitive and not fun, but I did want to keep in the parts where I added parts of the collection in and the things that I think Ariel might collect or things that she would likely find on the ocean floor randomly. However, like I said, we do have a few different versions of like various Little Mermaid rides, and I think it's Disneyland Japan that has an entire Little Mermaid section that's indoor, and they have their own little section that's dedicated to this scene as well. So I had some references from that, and I was trying to just like look through the background and see what I could find that the Disney parks had decided to place in the background of those rides as items that I could place in game if we had something similar. But things like jars, kettles, pots and pans, lots of like kitchen utensils, of course forks, any little random vases. The Star Wars pack actually comes with quite a few like obscure sort of unnamed vase looking items that I love to use all the time because I feel like they can fit in so many different themes and you can have them look like there's so many different things. They're just like generic enough that you don't have to worry about them being like an obviously super modern looking item or anything like that. So there is quite a bit of the Star Wars pack in this build. I feel like I'm saying that a lot recently, but I actually really do like the Star Wars pack. I know it got a lot of flack when it came out, but I use the build and buy pretty regularly as well as the cast items because they are just like leaning more towards that fantasy element that we don't really get a lot of in some of the Sims packs. Additionally, things like clocks, maps, globes, trophies, seashells, gemstones, stuff like that. So I really tried to go through the full catalog, debug items, random things that I could find, and just place them all over. There is another floor above the main one when you first walk in, so that floor above also got fully decorated with lots of collectible items. Now I want to point out I did use some debug items when making the space, but I tried my very best not to use any items that don't transfer over the gallery, considering that this is going to be a replacement lot, and some items that we have that are debug, I believe like certain plates and cups and glassware, things like that, when you try to place a lot from the gallery that uses those items, they don't always come over with the lot, and so things will be missing that should have originally been there. So I tried to avoid using things like that because I know that some people are either going to be adding this lot off of the gallery or not. I do plan at some point to drop tray files for my replacement lots just in case people want them, but they're going to be exclusive to Patreon for various reasons. I do not normally do that. I make pretty much nothing exclusive to Patreon. However, the issue with dropping tray files is essentially that people can kind of take your lots and claim them as their own, and I already get enough of that on the gallery as it is, so it's kind of annoying. So I'm just warning you guys, I'm coming up with solutions to make that as easy as possible from the transition off the gallery, and I will make them available for download, but this really will not be for a while. I haven't made any of my builds available as trays as of yet. It is something I plan to do down the line when necessary, and there's other lots that this might be necessary as well if they're super big or some of of those community space lots that change to different forms. Those don't always transition very well off of the gallery either, so I might make those available. If you don't want to use this space as a museum, I am planning on making it functional as a cafe. One of my patrons had recommended that I do so, and it gives a different way to utilize the slot, but also it's very common for a museum to have like a cafe space or a cafeteria, eatery type of thing. So I will be adding something on to the lot and making sure we have all the appropriate pieces so that you can have this function as a cafe if you want it to be a little bit different, maybe kind of transition that outdoor space around the back into more of like an outdoor eating area. It's not featured in today's speed build video. I'm trying to get a little bit ahead of myself in scheduling some videos here as the summer's coming up and I might be traveling a little bit, but just know that that is the plan down the line. The version that goes up on the gallery should be able to work for both, and you can literally just go up to the little house in the top left hand corner and hit that and then switch the lot type to the other one. And as long as you don't get that red triangle that you should be seeing in the video right now, because the museum currently does not have all the items placed that it needs to be a functioning museum, it will work for that particular lot type. As long as that's not there, whatever lot type you change it to, it will work for that lot type. Now, in addition to the two main rooms that feature the majority of the collection, I did have to, of course, have some kind of reference to Prince Eric's statue, which is one of Ariel's big features in her own collection. It has its own room in my version that is all lit up with beautiful pearl orbs from the wedding pack. And then upstairs, there is a room to paint off of the balcony, and there is a room for singing, because obviously that is something that Ariel enjoys as well, and this is kind of like her space, so I felt like having that there really made sense for her character. And that is going to be the end of today's speed build. I hope you guys enjoyed Thingamabob Grotto. If you would like to support the Disney Save on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link in my description box down below or the one at the end of the video. Get yourself early access to works in progress and my private Disney Save Discord where we plan and talk about the save. Thank you so much for watching today, and I will talk to you all in the next one.